There have been some pretty disappointing teams in college football in 2024, teams like Arizona, teams like Florida State, and heck, at this point even Mizzou, Alabama, or Ole Miss could be thrown in that department. But in my opinion, there is one team that has been more disappointing than pretty much anybody else, and that is the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Everyone talked all offseason about how Alan Bowman was the next big thing, could lead Oklahoma State to a Big 12 championship, and how the guy was just so unbelievably talented. Bowman has been horrible in 2024 so far, and they convinced their superstar running back Ollie Gordon to come back instead of going to Oregon or another big program, and it has bit him in a horrible way, as he has not lived up to the hype in the slightest. His offensive system has screwed him over, and Oklahoma State is currently 0-5 in the Big 12, and their season is over. There are fans calling for Mike Gundy's head right now, but how did Oklahoma State get to this point? How did they go from a team who was ranked and supposed to be near the top of the Big 12 to now being one of the worst Power 5 teams in college football? Today we're going to examine that question and talk about how Oklahoma State got to this point, what has gone wrong for them, and how I think the rest of the season and the future will look for them. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the Oklahoma State 2024 collapse. One of the only things that was predicted in the Big 12 conference before the season started is that it was going to be wide open. While that has definitely been true, there were tons of predictions about who the contenders would be and who were pretenders. A lot of people expected Utah to come in and ruin the conference, and they're currently sitting at 4-4 with a 1-4 mark in the Big 12. Some people thought Arizona would be pretty good, and they're 3-5 with a 1-4 record. You also have Kansas, who many thought could be a dark horse Big 12 team, and they're sitting at 2-6. But Oklahoma State was also projected to make the Big 12 title game, and now it looks like they're not even going to make a bowl game. The Cowboys are currently sitting at 3-5 with an 0-5 mark in the Big 12, and they've had one of the most disappointing seasons in college football so far. And to start, we have to look at Oklahoma State's coaching staff. Up front is Mike Gundy, the former Cowboy quarterback who legitimately might be the best head coach Oklahoma State has ever seen. He's been their head coach for 20 plus years now and has an overall record of 166-79 with a Big 12 championship in 2011 and championship game appearances in 2010, 2021, and 2023. In all those 20 years as a coach, he's only lost more than 5 games 4 times. Those were each of his first 3 seasons, where he went 4-7 in 2005 and then 7-6 in 2006 and 2007. Then there was one outlier year in 2018. More interesting is that he made a bowl game with Oklahoma State every year from 2006 until now, but it looks like this year might end up being the worst Cowboys team he's ever coached since he took over at head coach. And what's weird is he doesn't necessarily lack talent. A part of that is his offensive play calling. The offensive coordinator for the Cowboys this year is Casey Dunn, who's widely been criticized by the Oklahoma State fan base for his play calling for the last 5 years as he's been the OC. He originally came into his role as an offensive coordinator because of his great track record as a receivers coach at Oklahoma State, as from 2011 to 19, he developed guys like Justin Blackmon, James Washington, and Tylan Wallace, so there was a lot of thought that he could help keep the passing game going at a high level. After replacing Sean Gleason at coordinator in 2020, Dunn's offenses have scored 30.2 points per game, good for 52nd in the country. They had 31.1 points per game in 2021, which was top 50, 30.6 in 2022, which was 49th, and then 29.6 in 2023, which is good for 55th. For 4 seasons, the offensive scoring potential of Oklahoma State has hovered about around 30 points per game and 50th in the country. It's definitely not terrible, but for a program like Oklahoma State that should be one of the premier brands in the Big 12, it isn't good enough to win the conference championship and compete for a college football playoff berth, even in this expanded bracket. The problem only got worse this season. Despite putting up 30.5 points per game, which is right in the wheelhouse for what to expect from Coach Dunn, Oklahoma State's offense has been one of the most inept in the country at calling plays for the guys they have, and one of the most prominent examples of that lies in their running back, Ollie Gordon. But first, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, MyBookie. Convicted as I am about a certain bet, be sure to place your bet with MyBookie. This season, MyBookie is pulling out all the stops with incredible promotions like a weekly risk-free boost on Thursdays where you can bet without a sweat. If your bet hits, you win big. If it doesn't, forget it. MyBookie will refund your wager. But that's just the beginning. MyBookie is giving away hundreds of thousands in prizes with their Super Survivor and Square contests. Get your entries now in for your shot at huge cash rewards. When you're ready to get started, be sure to use my promo code Fisher50 and make sure to get some extra cash on top of your first deposit. If you type in Fisher50, you'll get up to $1,000 in a welcome bonus bet plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie's tiered bonuses make it easy to deposit with crypto or with credit, and the bigger your deposit, the bigger your bonus. The bonus would be 100% match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. With MyBookie, you can bet on anything, anywhere, at any time, and make your season a winning season. Be sure to check out my link down below and use my promo code Fisher50. Gordon came to OSU in 2022 as a freshman, putting up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns on 68 carries. Last year, he exploded to be the best running back in college football, going for an NCAA leading 1,700 yards with 21 touchdowns. Ollie was truly unstoppable, registering almost 6.1 yards per carry against Power 5 defenses and finishing 7th in the Heisman Trophy voting while being a lock for All-American honors. That's why it's so confusing that in 2024, Ollie has only seen 135 carries in 8 games. He has 568 yards and just 8 touchdowns. He's on track to finish the regular season with just over 800 yards, almost 1,000 less than he had last season. He's literally performing an entire season worse this year than he did last year. His yards per game went from 124 to just 71. But it's also very confusing. He'll have a great game against teams like BYU, where he'll be given 19 touches and put up 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. But then the next week against a bad team like Baylor, he'll carry the ball 18 times and only have 77 yards. He had just 76 against Kansas State, 50 at home against West Virginia, and 42 in a loss to Utah. Something with Ollie Gordon is not right, and all sources point to 2 culprits. Either the blocking scheme at Oklahoma State is not working like it did to create running lanes last season, or Casey Dunn is not scheming up the correct plays for Ollie to have success. Both of those come down to Coach Dunn not being as good of a coach as he needs to be. Oklahoma State currently finishes with just 111 rushing yards per game, which is 226 in the country across all of Division I. It also lies in the fact that Oklahoma State's passing game has been lackluster at best and downright awful at worst. Coming into the season, Alan Bowman was supposed to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. The former Texas Tech Red Raider and Michigan Wolverine has spent an eternity in college football and transferred to Oklahoma State to compete for the job in 2023 and actually ended up beating out Garrett Rangel to win that job. In 13 games as a starter last year, he put up 3,500 yards with 15 touchdowns and 14 picks. He's actually technically on pace to do better than that this year, as so far he has 2,000 yards and 14 touchdowns with 10 interceptions in just 6 starts. But since the Cowboys' offense isn't working, the coaching staff decided to occasionally run with Garrett Rangel at QB1 to try and jumpstart the offense. Garrett is younger and is a running threat. Aside from being more athletic, Rangel is younger than Bowman is, since Bowman is approaching 25 years old, which is ancient for a college quarterback. Garrett, on the other hand, is the future and is just a redshirt sophomore. But Garrett hasn't exactly blown up the quarterback battle either. He's thrown for just 192 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also has an interception in just 4 games. The quarterback room in Stillwater is just bad. There's no way around it, and they are not able to overcome the bad offensive play calling or a down year from their Heisman contending running back. It's already wasting great seasons from players like Brendan Presley and Deshaun Stribling at receiver, and they're wasting a good pass blocking offensive line as they've only allowed 7 sacks so far this year, and that's one of the top in the country. The quarterbacks are efficient, but are not a factor in Oklahoma State's games, and aren't a big enough plus in their offense to help them win games. But maybe the most important weak spot for Oklahoma State this season is on defense. After losing elite defensive coordinator Jim Knowles to Ohio State in 2022, they spent a season with former Vanderbilt head coach Derek Mason in 2023, before elevating Joe Bob Clements and Brian Nardo to co-defensive coordinators for 2024. This has been a disastrous choice for the Cowboys, since despite only letting up 30 points per game this season, it's still good for 102nd best defense in the country in terms of points allowed. If you ignore big blowouts against teams like South Dakota State and Tulsa, Oklahoma State allows almost 35 points per game. In those same 6 games, only one was a win against Arkansas, which they easily could have lost, and Oklahoma State averaged only 25.8 points per game. In other words, they average a 9-point loss against teams with a pulse. Only 2 games, BYU and Utah, were by 3 points. They've also been blown out twice against both K-State and West Virginia, and K-State beat them by 22 in a game that was really worse than it was, and West Virginia beat them by 24 in Stillwater the next week. There is something to be said about the quality of team that Oklahoma State has played so far this year. They started out their year against South Dakota State, who's become an FCS power, and won that game 44-20. Since then, the Jackrabbits have only lost 1 game to North Dakota State. They then followed it up with a double overtime thriller against Arkansas in what was one of the better games of the early season, but Arkansas fans are now calling this their most embarrassing loss in the season. The Hogs are 5-3 with a win over number 4 Tennessee, but were also blown out by LSU and only beat Auburn and UAB by 10. Their next game came against in-state rival Tulsa, and they won 45-10, but the Golden Hurricane are currently 3-5 and only won last week against UTSA because of a massive collapse from the Roadrunners. The game against Utah was supposed to be a preview of the Big 12 Championship game, but like I said before, the Utes are 4-4, and some people are questioning if Coach Whittingham should be pushed into retirement early now. Their most embarrassing loss, though, was to Baylor, who was openly looking for a replacement to their head coach, Dave Aranda, and they are also 4-4. It honestly doesn't look like it's going to get much easier for the Pokes either. This week they play an Arizona State team that's honestly a lot better than their 5-2 record, led by their huge breakout running back Cam Scatabo, who feels like he has stolen the season Ollie Gordon was supposed to have. They then travel to TCU, which might honestly be their last chance at a solid win on the year, before taking a bye week heading into a home game against Texas Tech in the Dust Bowl, then finishing the season at Colorado against Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and Coach Prime. Colorado's having a much better season than we all anticipated, and there's a good chance that Oklahoma State finishes the year below 500 for the first time since Gundy took over as head coach, which would be catastrophic to Cowboys fans and everyone around Stillwater. Cowboys fans have been rumbling about moving on for Coach Gundy the last couple of years, given his ability to rack up regular season wins but lose all the big games. Everyone remembers that Big 12 championship game against Baylor a few years ago, where he literally came within a few inches of winning the conference title, but he's suffered in big games before. He had Oklahoma State in the running for a BCS national championship in 2011 before he stumbled at Iowa State and ended up watching that game from his couch. He'll likely finish his career with a 4-15 record against his most heated rival in Oklahoma, and since the Bedlam series won't be renewed until the 2030s, he probably won't be coaching by then. Mike Gundy is Oklahoma State though. He was a quarterback there and has spent nearly his entire life with the Cowboys in some capacity, starting as a receivers coach and now being the head man for quite some time. It's pretty clear though he's going to have to make some tough decisions surrounding recruiting and his own coaching staff, or he will need to step aside and let somebody else lead his alma mater. There's no reason why Oklahoma State should be 3-5 this year and fighting just to make a bowl game. The Big 12 looked like their oyster, as they really thought they could be a top 3 team this year and potentially become the premier program in the conference. But for now though, Oklahoma State has been extremely disappointing. Ollie Gordon has not been put in the right system, and I bet he wishes he went to Oregon. Alan Bowman is another 7th-year ancient quarterback who just isn't all that good. And it just seems like Coach Gundy is not getting the most out of the talent he has. He has good receivers, he has a solid offensive line, and there are definitely plenty of pieces on the defense, but coaching has destroyed this team, and now I think their confidence is shot. Oklahoma State's dead last in the Big 12, and I'm not sure if they get another win on the season. At this point, they should just plop in Garrett Rangel and try to plan for the future, and hopefully Ollie Gordon doesn't get hurt so he can have a good NFL career. But what do you guys think? If you're an Oklahoma State fan, what has gone wrong for the Cowboys? What do you think has to fix it? And what other team should I do a collapse video on next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.